Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, boy, I know we've said it before. I know we'll probably say it again, but Daniel Jones is just not good at playing quarterback.
Dude, he's awful. He threw 2 picks in that final drive and still got a touchdown. I'm so mad.
You know, and it's funny because I had sent you the link to like, hey, we can get started on the show whenever. And you had replied, no, not yet. I have to wait until he throws another pick. Like,
yeah, right. I was waiting for it. And this is before he threw either of those 2 almost picks on that last drive too. And I was like, I got it.
Yeah, the one that's going out on Twitter right now where someone says something fairly profane to him on the field. Well earned, by the way. After he had thrown that pick, I imagined you just having the tweet all written out and like ready to send, like, whoa. that was a drop. That was a drop. My bad.
I still had hope though. That tweet had legs for a while, but well.
Yeah, well, you win some, you lose some, and in Daniel Jones's case, you tend to lose a lot. It is just peculiar to because I've never encountered a quarterback where I sit and like I've been forced to watch him more often than I'd like to, thanks to the decision to put a bunch of NFC East teams in primetime games. Which please stop. This is please, I'm begging you. And there have just on a more consistent basis, I have never said aloud, wow, that's a terrible throw on more throws for any other quarterback than Daniel Jones recently. It's just like, yep, that's going to be 10 yards above that guy's head. Oh, nope, he's going to try to do the McNabb bounce pass there. No, that's no good. Oh, he threw to the outside instead of the inside where his man no, that's just the only quarterback in recent memory I can think of that has thrown more terrible and questionable passes in such a short period of time would have been Ben DiNucci on Sunday night.
Oh, come on, man. That was
pride of your Dukes, but
there's a good discussion to be had in the mailbag. We'll talk about Ben DiNucci and how he was held back by his supporting cast and coaching staff.
Yeah, I'm sure that we will talk all about his sidearm. And all of the throws that would have been amazing.
He's innovating, man. He's innovating.
all these throws that would have been amazing if they were caught and thrown well.
Yeah, well, if they were caught, we'd all be talking about it, right? Like, come on, man.
If he would have made,
he's the Submarinor.
If he would have made between half and 3/4 of those sidearm throws, we would be heralding him and demanding that he get some ridiculous contract. Like, you are the next Patrick Mahomes. But no, that's not what happened. But we will talk all about your beloved former quarterback of your fighting Dukes later in the episode. But I just want to thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of Norse Code. Hope you enjoy it. You may notice that the listing looks a little bit different in your podcast aggregator of choice, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play. I forget if Google Play is still a thing, but
I think there's still Google Play podcasts.
Yeah,
Dogcatcher, Podcast Addict,
all of these things that
Feedly.
All of these things, maybe all these things that go out, because we ended up getting a new logo by the world famous. I'm just saying that because he's on Twitter. Draw Play Dave, who made an excellent new image for us and really encapsulates everything about the show that one needs to know if they're going to listen to Norse Code.
Our asks of him were probably like a graphic design nightmare. That we were like, hey, can you include all of these elements that are included in our show? And it's just like, it's way better to do it like simple, right?
Yeah.
But we were like, yeah, we want 8 or 9 of these things, and 10 colors, please. And he did, and it looks good. He did it.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. If you haven't seen it, you can take a look at us on social media. On Twitter at NorseCodeDN, or the Facebook page has it as well. You will notice it also on your podcast aggregator of choice. I did see that it was updated on Spotify and I believe on Apple Podcasts, as I pull that up on my phone, which I suppose reveals what sort of phone I have. Not yet on Apple Podcasts, but yeah, it is uploaded. So it's pretty cool. So just want to thank Drawplay Dave. You should follow him to see all of the fantastic ways he has killed Arif over the years in his comics.
In fairness, in some of those, I kill myself in those comics.
Well, yes, but I still feel like he has some form of control over it since he's the one holding the pencil.
Authors don't control their characters.
Oh.
The author is merely the vessel through which the character speaks.
All right, Alan Moore. So anyway, if you'd like to see it, please check that out. We are really happy with it, and also it means that we are now selling merchandise. If you are interested in having an Arif and James a picture on your shirt, likeness of us on a mask, which I thought was fantastic and hilarious, that our logo can be put on a mask. You can access the page where you can buy such things. It is at norsecode.threadless.com. Again, that is norsecode.threadless.com. And what happens is you end up making it to the initial page. It's kind of like a splash screen. I would just suggest going to the collections page and clicking on Norse Code, because then you have the full listing of the more likely things that you'd be looking for, whether it's shirts. There's a couple of mugs. There is, in fact, a Norse Code mask, which I think is hilarious, and a couple other things, buttons, stickers.
Yeah, there's like buttons, stickers, coffee mugs, phone cases for most of the major phone brands. Unfortunately, not for Google Pixel, unless maybe I'll double check that. But men's t-shirt and hoodie, women's t-shirt and hoodie, kids like for toddlers and stuff, like t-shirt and a one. I think you can get a Norse Code onesie.
There is, in fact, a Norse Code onesie that's there.
I was if someone bought that would be an insane step for the brand.
Well, I mean, this does open up the possibilities of making an Arif's Parenting Corner onesie. So there's plenty of options that we can take these steps in. So, but anyway, a big thank you to Drawplay Dave for his hard work. He is on Twitter at Drawplay Dave. His actual website itself that as his main comic is at thedrawplay.com. Again, thank you so much. That was really cool of him to put together over the last couple of weeks. So really appreciate it. And there's a couple of fun outtake pictures that he had made that will find themselves on Twitter at some point the next time that we play the Seattle Seahawks, which by Minnesota's luck will probably be next year again. So. And probably,
I think they are guaranteed to play the Seahawks next year. Actually,
yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So, but again, this is over at norsecode.threadless.com, and I would just click on the collections area. Otherwise, you can just click on the main image, and it ends up just having you go through the list of what exactly you would be looking for. So that is my suggestion to you. If you are interested in supporting the show, obviously you could go there, or if you would like bonus material, you can go to patreon.com/norsecode. They actually received word of the logo and the shop stuff first, which reminds me, actually, I was going to mention this in the last section. So we get an email whenever there's a sale into the shop, and it's not because we're sending anything out. It's just because they're notifying the people who own the shop, hey, you ended up getting a sale. And it says what your take is of the sale. And we're not selling these to get rich or whatever. This isn't really much of a fundraiser thing. This is something that people have asked for over the years. Hey, we'd like to buy some sort of Norse Code merchandise to help you out.
Yeah, the profit margin on each individual item is pretty low.
Yeah, so but the thing is that we get this email, and somebody had purchased 2 items, and we get the email, and it couldn't have been better, quite honestly.
Perfect.
It really was beautiful, and it said that you've had an artist shop sale, and it said congratulations, you just earned $3.50. And
the very first sale 350.
So I'm sitting in my chair, basically having a seizure, laughing, and I'm asked, what's going on? And so I put it up on the TV. I was like, tell me what's funny about this. He goes, oh my God. And I sent it to Arif. I was like, did you see what that email just said?
Well, so James sends me the chat. Did you see what it says in the headline of the email? And I thought he was mad. Like, I thought we had screwed up so badly, like something offensive had just popped up or something. And I was like, oh God, oh no. And so I check, and I'm just like, the subject line is just, you had an artist shop sale. I'm thinking, I'm putting on my like super leftist, I get offended at everything hat, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm lost, James. What's going on?
Yeah, as it turns out, that was not the case. Nope, it was we had earned $3.50 from our first sale, and we were laughing maniacally from it. So, but again, if you'd like to support the show and receive bonus content and news before anyone else about Norse Code, you can do so at patreon.com/Norse Code for $3.50 a month. You too can have access to the bonus material that we put out at least once a week. Last week, we even put out 2 episodes, but the one is kind of an acquired taste, admittedly, for the watch along with Maddie Matheson. But in any case, we did provide that for you guys last week. We will have the bonus episode for this week probably out on Thursday. But you can also go to paypal.me/Norse Code as well if you are looking at trying to just have a one-time donation. If t-shirts, buttons, and travel mugs, which admittedly I am getting a travel mug. I think that looked awesome. But if you would like to do the Threadless or the norsecode.threadless.com as well, you can certainly do that as well. So let's get into the actual show itself, because the Vikings won, which is a bit of I think it's a bit of a shock. Do you think that Green Bay underestimated Minnesota in this case, or was this just incredible coaching?
I think it's more the latter than the former. I think Green Bay just generally, I think the way that they prepare generally avoids those kind of mistakes. I don't think they tend to underestimate opponents. Like I think Aaron Rodgers is like super arrogant, but I think that also he doesn't want to get punked on TV, right? So I think he takes care of preparation and stuff like that. And when he talks about, Mike Zimmer, he does it with like a lot of genuine respect and a lot of discussion about how difficult it has been for him to be productive against Zimmer, which, historically that has borne out. Recently, it's been a little bit less true, which I think Vikings fans are well aware of. But yeah, no, I think they took the game seriously. I think that this is kind of one of those, if this had occurred in a playoff game, we'd be putting it up there with the Saints playoff game in terms of how great a coaching performance it was. Because I think that the Vikings game against the Saints is one of the greatest coaching performances we've seen from a Vikings coach.
And you're referring to last year and not the Minneapolis Miracle.
Yeah, that was, whoa, what the hell happened? That was a
collapse.
A coaching victory, yeah. Well, it was a Minnesota collapse followed by a Saints collapse, really. But yeah, I would say that the coaching of this game was really remarkable. Like at some point, you had 7 rookies on the field on defense. Like how often does that happen? I'm going to have to ask PFF because that is a wild stat to me. I'm trying to count all the rookies, right? Because you've got Wonnum, you've got Troy Dye. You've got all the was every corner on the field a rookie, and then Josh Metellus at safety too. So that's like 5 or 6, and then there's probably a rookie among the defensive tackles that I'm forgetting to name right now too. Just like wild that there were so many players on the field, like Harrison Hand, so many players on the field that had not played in an NFL game the prior year.
This seemed like just a rag. This seemed like such a ragtag group of like troublemakers, like ne'er-do-wells, like this
ne'er-do-wells.
How often do they do good? They ne'er-do-well.
This is an exciting new meaning of ne'er-do-well. No, they're not like rascals. They're bad at football.
It really had all the, maybe this is just what Minnesota needs to do when they go into Green Bay, is just have no expectations. Like, there's no possible way we're going to win this. Oh,
I mean, Aaron Rodgers didn't have any film of Harrison Hand to work off of. He didn't know what to do.
exactly. It's like, this felt more like a game from the Major League movie franchise than it did a football game. I was like, it's like there are people playing on the Minnesota Vikings. Like, I didn't recognize that name at all. Like, normally I end up picking up like Madden at some point during the year, just to learn a couple of names. Like, it wouldn't have helped this game. It was like, this is, are you practice squad? Like, how the hell who are you exactly? Did you, like, are you a walk-on? I don't understand how any of this works. This was a really odd football game, and it was made even more odd by the fact that they weren't really allowing themselves to punt or kick during the game because the wind was so high too.
Oh, yeah. So Kirk Cousins doesn't throw a single pass beyond 10 yards from the line of scrimmage, which is fine in a game where you're running really dominantly well and you're generating big play after big play in the run game. Dalvin Cook's expected points was enormous in this game. So let's say I can pull it up real quick. So his expected points on rush attempts was 0.4 per play, which might be the highest of any high volume running back this year. I'll double check that, but certainly he accounted for the highest percentage of yardage in of receiving yardage in a game this year, 33.8%. Through his yards after the catch. So that was pretty enormous. The fact that, even Alexander Mattison, who clearly wasn't as effective as Cook, his success rate was even higher. He just wasn't as explosive. And he got, 0.2 or 0.18 EPA per play, which is just kind of crazy too. You don't tend to see that. So, for example, let's see if I can pull up the other way around here. In the previous game, Aaron Jones was clipping at like negative 0.1, and he was having a great game. The thing is, just running backs don't tend to have positive expected points because it's better to throw the ball than it is to run it. We talk about that a lot. And one of the elements where that's true is that all running backs, even the good ones, tend to have negative expected points per play. That wasn't true of Mark Ingram last year because of how efficient the Baltimore running game was. But for the most part, just a really astounding run game that allowed the Vikings to generate explosive plays without having to throw the ball that far into the air. So yeah, the crazy return that they got from Cook running the ball was and rushing it after the catch was the entire offense. I mean, Cook led all players in receiving yardage. He obviously led all players in rushing yardage, and then for yards from scrimmage. In an absolutely wild performance from Cook. Yeah, they didn't have to throw the ball, and that was because of the wind, but also because the Packers couldn't be successful when they threw the ball. They ended up throwing the ball like 41 times, I think. And then there's like 2 sacks and then like 3 scrambles. So yeah, like 49 action plays for Aaron Rodgers. They dropped back to pass. And because of the wind, he had decreased accuracy deep downfield. He couldn't be as aggressive about pushing it. He still threw some pretty good throws, but for the most part, the Packers couldn't find a way to keep up after those first 2 drives. Obviously, they scored in the first 2 drives. After those first 2 drives, they couldn't find a way to keep up. And if they can't keep up and they're down to their backup running back and they've got, they're missing their left tackle and they had to move their right guard or something like that, they don't have as effective a run game as the Vikings do, despite the fact that the Vikings' run defense is a lot worse. And the Packers' run defense is like, it's kind of meme-worthy, but it should be better when Kenny Clark is on the field and Kamal Martin is healthy. Like, it shouldn't have been as bad as it was, honestly. If I was actually talking to Zach Rapport, our guest before the show, and I said, if I had known about the wind, I would have changed my prediction because we're basically asking, whose run game do you trust more? Do you trust the Vikings, Dalvin Cook, and their run game against the Packers defense, or do you trust the Packers run game with Jamal Williams without Aaron Jones against the Vikings run defense? And you're left with two pretty good running games against two pretty bad run defenses. But I think I would absolutely take Dalvin Cook and the Vikings' poor run blocking in that situation, despite the fact that the Packers have one of the top 5 run blocking offensive lines in the league. So yeah, I think it also required a unsustainably good effort from Cook. I don't think we're going to see this from Cook more than once more in a season. Like, I think we might get one more game where he just kind of carries the entire team on his back in a way that exceeds the blocking in front of him, that exceeds kind of, the number of avoided tackles that he got and stuff like that. It's not rare, but it certainly is not common that this will happen, which is why you can have games like this and still be able to kind of effectively argue that running backs may not matter as much as we think. But, this is the kind of game where, the Vikings were able to do everything they needed to do with only 14, I think it's 15 dropbacks. Yeah, 15 dropbacks, 14 passing attempts. Nobody gave, so Kirk Cousins was under pressure for one play. So a 1 in 15 pressure rate. And no one was assigned by PFF that pressure. I still think it might be Kyle Rudolph's fault, but no one was assigned that pressure, which is to say that for the most part, the Vikings offensive line protected really well, but it just helps if you can get rid of the ball right away. And like you said, the wind was the biggest part of that, is that they had a quick passing game because they couldn't afford to do anything else with the way that the weather was going.
Yeah, it was really just the perfect windstorm of events that happened here. It was surprising for a little bit, and then you realize, like, no, he's throwing and it's not making it to the receiver. Like, this is normally they show I believe they did show what happens to the kickers. In pregame, like, he lined up.
Yeah, that was wild.
And like, you're seeing the ball zigzag, like, that's not normal. But they never show that happening to the passes from the quarterback in the pregame, and they really could have done it for that one. It was truly that
impressive. Would have been fun, honestly, if they'd taken some video, the quarterback's checking it deep and the ball just like getting picked up by the wind and floating somewhere else.
Yep. Like, all right, so Aaron Rodgers is going to drop back and just throw 35 yards here just and knows exactly where it's going to go because he's Aaron Rodgers. And he drops back and it just like listfully just drifts to the left. Just like, huh. Yeah,
kind of like how Aikman said the Carson Wentz throw just kind of got caught by the wind and floated into Trevon Diggs' hands.
Yeah, like, let's go with that as the explanation as to why that happened. And for somebody who's a Packers fan, this had to feel a lot like what ended up happening in the San Francisco NFC Championship game, where you had a running back just eat your lunch. Just right in front of you. No chill at all. And may also remind them, hey, you still can't do anything when you have a decent running back and a surprising offensive line doing their job. You can't do anything against that if you're the Packers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like whenever the Packers fall short, it always feels like it's something that it probably should not matter as much as it does. Like, for example, the run defense thing. Like, it's plagued them ever since, Joe Webb showed the 49ers how to do it way back in 2012 and Colin Kaepernick ran all over them. Ever since then, it's just been kind of like, again, it's like been a meme that they've just been bad against the run. But the thing is, most of the time, they've actually not been that bad against the run. They haven't been great necessarily, but last year they were actually pretty good against the run. But when they do fall short, it always seems to be like because of that, right? and like, they get run for like 250 yards given up on the ground, and it's just, what happened, man? Kenny Clark is back. Kamal Martin is finally healthy. He's actually playing pretty well. He made some mistakes in this game. Darnell Savage is actually usually a pretty good run defender. Dean Lowry has grown as a run defender. Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith are not that bad. They're actually pretty decent run defenders. So, like, what happened? It's just some games they just completely lose the plot and can't defend the run. This is one of those games. Don't be surprised if 3 weeks from now the Packers are just like crushing some team against the run, right? And it's just like, yeah, okay, I guess this is just one of those games. But yeah, like you said, last year against the 49ers got dominated in the run game, much like the Vikings. And this year here, they got absolutely great. And the first, what was it, week 2 against the Packers last year? they got beaten up in the run game. It just so happened that the Vikings were passing the ball way worse, and so they couldn't end up winning the game. And I think a lot of us expected that when they played the Packers again last year, that they would be able to, because Dalvin was generating like 6-7 yards a carry in week 2, and then in week 8, 9, whatever, when the second game was. I think a lot of us expected that the Vikings running game would be successful again, and it just wasn't as successful. But yeah, every time the Packers seem to fall short, it just seems to be like that probably shouldn't be a reason a team falls short. But they got their lunch eaten. Like it was bad.
So there's this. I don't know if you watch any of the Pat McAfee stuff or anything like that, but there is a great reaction video to when Jordan Love was drafted, and they have this guy on who is who's pretending to be Mel Kiper. He does a halfway decent Mel Kiper voice impersonation, and he's a Packers fan, and they had just had Aaron Rodgers on, and the reaction is hilarious. And then after he storms out, screaming "God damn it!" and just slams the door, walks out. He comes back, and they're like, "Mel, what's what are you thinking about this pick?" He's like, "Well, I don't know. Are you gonna have him gain 200 yards and play D tackle? Like, what is he gonna do?" We just watched the 49ers just destroy us on the run and destroy our defense. Why are we not doing something there? Why are we not doing something for the wide receiver? So I can't help but think of the reaction that he had when I see the Packers just get demolished on the run like that. It was just it seems so funny to me. All right, so we're not saying that Green Bay underestimated Minnesota, but this was an odd game to be sure. And I'm willing to bet that if they had the ability to kick, Aaron Rodgers doesn't miss 2 4th-down conversions. Like they probably just end up punting in that situation instead of going for it on 4th and 10. And I think the other one was like 4th and 6. Like there was a couple of, again, this was a perfect storm, a perfect windstorm of dumb things that could possibly happen that allowed Minnesota to win this.
Well, there's also like, what is it? I shouldn't talk too much about the calls because I think it kind of went both ways, because there's like the bad pass interference that took away that, what was it, deep in the end zone that actually it took away Ezra Cleveland giving up a pressure in the game, honestly. But yeah, it was like a deep end zone pass interference. That was kind of a weird call. But then in the fourth quarter, something else came against it. So it just kind of came.
Well, we can talk about calls because Vikings fans, Vikings enthusiasts, those who have watched a number of Vikings-Packers games and been incredibly frustrated at the lack of holding calls or the lack of pass interference calls or the lack of any calls against them while they're in Lambeau.
If we want to talk about something unsustainable, it's the number of holding calls that they called against the Packers in Lambeau. Yeah. We're not going to see that next year.
I was laughing, but I was laughing so hard at every single time that the Packers ended up getting called for holding, because we had talked back week 1 with a guest. It was like the Packers have this ability, the way they end up teaching about that's a hold but not a hold that gets called, and they were getting called for a number of holds, and it just kept backing him up and backing him up. It's like, this is insane. The Vikings might actually win this. This is weird.
Yeah, and then on occasion when the Vikings committed a penalty, like I remember when Brian O'Neill false started, the very next play, Zadarius Smith just like runs up the middle. Like he tries to time the snap count, and he just screws it up. So it just looked like he's running through the middle of the offense. And so they get the 5 yards back. So it goes 1st and 10, 3-yard gain, 2nd and 7, penalty, 2nd and 12, penalty, 2nd and 7. They get it back. The Vikings pass for like 16 yards. And then there's even another Packers penalty later in that drive on Tyler Lancaster for holding, which you don't see very often on defensive linemen. But yeah, the passing complete deep to Justin Jefferson, that was a Jair Alexander defensive pass interference. That hurt the Vikings, or that helped the Vikings. And then the penalty on Dakota Dozier, a false start, that hurt them. And then a penalty on Josh Jackson against Adam Thielen that helped the Vikings. And it set up, like that was on 3rd and 6 against Adam Thielen. It set up the Dalvin Cook touchdown up the middle. So yeah, just like kind of wild. Aaron Rodgers scrambles for 8 yards on 2nd and 7, penalty on Mercedes Lewis for holding. Like it was a surprising number of penalties were called on the Packers.
Just
And
undisciplined swine. Clearly, just
right, yeah, learn to
un
play the game.
undisciplined. Because that was the joke a couple of years ago. I know that because we were still doing the show about Detroit. It's like this is the year they're very disciplined. They're not going to have any penalties, and then they end up being like the most penalized team in the league. So it's like clearly discipline is what they need here. Yeah, the Packers were just all over the place. It was I can't remember a time where I watched the Packers this penalized in Lambeau against Minnesota. It was absurd.
Yeah, it was pretty wild. But yeah, all sorts of unsustainable things helped the Vikings there. I think, for example, I don't want to like overemphasize this, but I think, the fact that, Rick Wagner, I always want to call him Ricky Wagner because that's what he went by, but now he goes by Rick. He just had an abysmal game, right? Like, yeah, obviously DJ Wonnum played well, but he had like maybe one of the worst games I've seen from him. And then we see, Aaron Rodgers just miss a couple of throws that he just hasn't this year. That part of that has to do with the wind. Part of that's just, Rodgers' accuracy was just kind of weird. He made some weird decisions in this game. The holding penalties, obviously, the yards after the catch for Dalvin Cook and his ability to break tackles, the missed blocks that were just not punished for the Vikings. That was pretty big. The fact that they were able to generate explosive plays without throwing a pass over 20 yards, just totally unsustainable stuff. The fact that the Vikings were able to generate a somewhat productive passing game without play action, right? Like, one of their play actions just ended up being a sack, right? And they were just like, well, can't do that again. And they were fine, right? Like all kinds of unsustainable things happened in this game. And I don't want to harp on it too much because it was one of the most fun games I think I've watched from the Vikings in a while. And I don't want to just be like, well, that's not going to work. 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 Like, I don't think it is. That doesn't mean we can't enjoy the fact that it happened. Right. So, why great game. Wild that like you have to take all this in.
So Cook demolished Green Bay, but Devontae Adams, who we all expected to have a pretty decent game, ended up with 3 touchdowns of his own. And I had a running track on Google, or not on Google, on Twitter, about like the records for touchdowns for both of them between Cook and Adams. Like, well, apparently they're going for the record today. And Adams was just all over the place. When they were accurate, Adams was getting the ball and Adams was scoring.
Yeah. Well, especially because especially early on. It was kind of funny watching the Cook and Adams touchdown tracker, especially because Thielen probably should have had that touchdown on the Josh Jackson penalty, but he just held him, right. So they're like, we'll run it up the middle with Cook. One thing I want to say is that on the goal line plays, Ezra Cleveland did a really remarkably good job. And it didn't matter because Cook either went in another direction for the touchdown or another direction to get stuffed. But on the plays that Cook like broke off, like the 50 or not the 50, the 37-yard run, Ezra Cleveland did really poorly. It was just kind of funny, and he went up Cleveland's gap anyway. But yeah, Devontae Adams, so the Vikings, I think. Obviously they didn't like contain him, right? Like he still scored a bunch of points on your fantasy team if you had him. But the Vikings did a pretty good job making sure he didn't end the game against them. I think just by doing some of the stuff that they've been doing since like week 4, week 5, where they switched to cover 2, which I wrote about a while back. But it seems to be that they're continuing to do it. They're just like, hey, we've got 3 kind of bad cornerbacks that got worse over the course of the game because of injuries. And we need to protect them. Our safeties are elite. Let's put them in a position where if a play needs to be made, maybe it's the safeties that'll do it. And so Adams couldn't, especially after the second half, Adams just couldn't get through over the top or anything like that because the coverage was dictating that Rodgers throw somewhere else. And then he did throw somewhere else. So really good job there. And it's just kind of weird to say, wow, really remarkable coaching job from the Vikings to play cover 2. Like the most basic coverage, one of the first ones you learn in football. And it was like the smartest thing that they could have done is to do what they've been doing to limit quarterbacks ever since they limited Russell Wilson in week, whenever it was, 4, 5, must have been 5. So Yeah. They did a little bit of cover two against Deshaun Watson, and then they did it basically full time against Russell Wilson. And it's something that I think we're just going to see a lot of this year because if you can hold back Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams that way, and they started bracketing him a lot, obviously with Harrison Smith on top and whoever on the like Harrison Hand or Chris Boyd or whoever was just available at the time on the
Generic
bottom.
create your own football player on Madden
Right.
here. Yeah.
6'2", stiff as a board rookie. Yeah, that guy, throw him in. um, yeah, that bracket worked out a lot. But yeah, I mean, kudos to the Vikings for kind of adjusting and preventing that from just going off because the Packers, again, they dropped back to pass 49 times. And Rodgers, though he averaged 7 yards an attempt, just couldn't find ways to be successful on a play-to-play basis often enough for the Packers to tighten up the score.
Just a really weird series of events. And even at the very end of the game when, the Packers were down 6, you sat there and just like, okay, well, it was like the Russell Wilson thing at the very end of the Seahawks game, where I'm just sitting in the chair like, I know exactly what's going to happen here. Like all Vikings fans are just preconditioned to believe that the way that this game was going to end was that he was going to march down the field and score. And then either the wind was taking it or bad targets or good defense was happening. And I'm not positive on the defense part, but all of a sudden the Vikings were able to make a stop in impressive fashion by someone you haven't exactly been high on.
You DJ Wonnum?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, he had a pretty good game. He had a sack, and another quarterback hit on top of that sack, and I think 3 other pressures according to PFF. And actually, a lot of the defenders ended up having a good game. Hercules Mataafa did pretty well. He got 5 pressures as well, I want to say. And then let me take a quick look at the game report from PFF because they ended up with multiple defenders with at least 4 pressures. So, real quick, we've got and then Jalen Holmes with 5. All of them are hurries. And then Next Gen Stats had Hercules Mataafa as the closest defender to the quarterback at time of throw or time of sack on average over the course of their time on the field on passing plays. So Mataafa clearly was able to get close, but yeah, Wonnum was the one that was able to kind of close, make sure he logged a hit. That hit, I think, was an incompletion, and then also that sack, which was a coverage sack. It was nice that the Vikings were able to force the Rodgers to hold on to the ball and scramble that long. But I will say, one needs to account for the fact that Wonnum was playing against somebody who was playing very poorly. Like, I wouldn't say Wagner is like a bottom tier right tackle or anything like that, but the way he played in the game, he wasn't able to get his hands up in time. He wasn't kick sliding really quickly. He just wasn't reacting as quickly as he was playing like a bottom level right tackle. And I think it was more that than Wonnum playing well. That said, a lot of bad players don't have the ability to take advantage of that. And so definitely credit to Wonnum for making something out of that opportunity because, that's not always going to be there. And when it is there, you need to kind of prove that you deserve to be on the field. So he has, I think, demonstrated that he definitely deserves a high number of snaps. He had 30 pass rushing snaps in this game, 37 snaps overall. Fantastic. Let's see more of that because I think that he's proven he deserves a lot of that. Also spending a lot of time rushing from that side was Mataafa, who had the same number of pressures. And so I think both of them deserve to have that many, pass rushing snaps going forward. They basically had I'm not going to say a 50-50 split because Jalen Holmes also spent a good amount of time on that side, as did Afadi, but or Afadi on the other side. But I think that both of them deserve significantly more reps. We saw a lot of it on third down, so we saw all 4 of them on the field at once. And I'd like to see kind of more because this is what you'd expect a good player to do. Now, obviously, when this sort of thing happens, it can kind of trick you. Playing against bad competition can make a player look better than they are. So we'll kind of see. But yeah, it was good that he was able to make something of it. Then obviously, the reason the Vikings drafted him, his traits, especially his length, that played a significantly enormous role on the final play, which was the strip sack and fumble recovery. So that's all good to see. you want a player in that position to be able to make the play. Not all players can do that. That's an asset. He is playing better than over the past couple of games than I would have expected, even after you account for all of these other factors. But I will say there's still room to kind of be careful on it.
It was refreshing to see. It was a bit of a surprise, and but certainly a welcome one. We talked about the offensive line for Green Bay kind of messing up a bit. How exactly was Dalvin Cook able to do what he did on Sunday? Like, was this just really good play by my man CJ Ham, or how exactly did the offensive line turn into something worth half a damn?
Yeah, Ham actually was kind of just all right. On some of the big runs, he was pretty key, so I don't want to diminish that. But on some of the other runs, he kind of screwed up a little bit. So maybe as Ham goes, the running offense goes. Maybe that's how it is. Because those successful plays, he's playing very well, and those unsuccessful plays, he seems to be one of the culprits. But yeah, I thought we saw some pretty egregious misses from Ezra Cleveland. I thought we saw some pretty egregious misses from Dakota Dozier. And then I thought, we saw a couple of misses from CJ Ham. So I don't think that it was entirely a product of the blocking all being there for him. That said, Cleveland also had some pretty devastatingly good blocks. Brian O'Neill had some really great reps in the run game, which you don't typically see from him. He's much more of a pass protector. Riley Reef, kind of the same thing. He's been much better pass protector this year and most years than he has been a run blocker. Here, he was a really great run blocker. So having both tackles play well, having one guard have some really great kind of highlight moments, that's pretty big. I think that was a big part of it. But the reason I'm worried about sustainability is because I think a lot of it was just individual effort from Dalvin Cook. So we've got a mailbag question about, should we throw Dalvin Cook's name into the MVP ring and have a discussion about, whether or not running backs matter and specifically whether or not Dalvin Cook matters. And I just kind of want to remind people at this point in the season last year, we were having the exact same discussion. And then Cook's yards after contact dropped significantly. And this is before injury. His yards after contact dropped significantly. His avoided tackles per rush dropped significantly. His yards per carry just in general and his success rate dropped significantly. And they all reverted to an above average baseline level of play. But they all reverted to essentially doing a little bit more than what the blocking allowed. And that was that kind of at that point that Alexander Mattison was playing at the same level as him. Now, Madison's not playing at his level right now, and he wasn't in this game for sure. But I would say that Cook had an extraordinarily individual performance in this game, and that is not kind of a repeatable thing to expect from your running backs. I think it's very easy to see individual games by running backs who take over, and Cook took over the game, and he's the reason that they won this game. But also to say, that doesn't mean that kind of going forward that, he's going to be the reason they're going to win future games or that they'll be able to consistently rely on this. So, he was able to kind of make a lot out of a little when it was just a little, and he was able to take advantage of everything that was there when the blocking was kind of perfect. And it also helped that Irv Smith was a really phenomenal blocker. I thought it was really helpful that Kyle Rudolph actually did a pretty decent job on most of his run blocking reps. I thought it was really useful that you had good downfield blocking from Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen to turn, 8-yard gain into a 20-yard gain. So all of that plays a role too. But I think a lot of it is that Cook individually played pretty well. And that's a reason to think that the run game won't necessarily always be there, because if your run blocking isn't always there, and I think the PFF run blocking grades were pretty generous. I think they were higher than I would have given them for some of these players. But if your run blocking isn't that good, you still might have individual games where your running back shows up. But for the most part, for most games, that's going to come back and bite you, and the running game's not going to be as good.
What an odd game.
Very unusual.
What a fun game. Don't get me
Absolutely
wrong. It was entertaining as hell, but it was just a very odd set of circumstances. What can we say to wrap up the discussion on the game? Because this is not. I don't know if this is the sort of thing that is sustainable, as you had said, moving forward. Whether it's the penalty luck or whether it's the fact that we didn't have to rely on Kirk Cousins' arm to win. And the fact that it was ridiculously windy out, so it's not like you were put in a position where you even had to worry about your kicker. So, what exactly can we take away from this?
Um, I think the Vikings are tactically coached very well. I think that it still may be a debate how good of a head coach that Mike Zimmer is. I think most people know where I fall in that debate, but I think it's unquestionably true that Mike Zimmer is a remarkably good defensive tactical coach, and that this game is a great demonstration of that. Like no matter what, whether or not he's a good head coach or not, he is remarkably good at designing defenses, and this game is just an incredible demonstration of that because I mean the Vikings were playing, you know, short-handed and short-legged, honestly. Like they just didn't have the horses to play defense, and they ran out of cornerbacks. They put Anthony Harris in the slot at one point. They were just like, "All right, Metellus, is your first game ever. Have fun out there.
Yeah, hell,
You're playing cover two."
Thielen was joking about potentially going out and playing as corner too.
Put me in, coach. I love that story because in the replies to those tweets, there's just a bunch of like, and they're earnest. I don't want to make too much fun of them, but there's like a bunch of, Minnesotans that are just like, yeah, man, he's such a team player. What grit, what incredible passion. This is why we love having him on the team. And it's just like, I mean, he was like, he would do it if he was asked, don't get me wrong, but he was like mostly joking. Like it wasn't like a Julian Edelman or Troy Brown kind of situation where they were like, all right, I'm prepared for this. Or like Devin Hester might do it on occasion, right? Because he was really trained as a cornerback. This was definitely like a joke, but I mean, I would have liked to see because then you get the Edelman cops in there again, right? Because people have stopped comparing him to Julian Edelman for a while now. He's just kind of now people are compared to him, right? Because he's established himself. I should say white receivers are compared to him. But if he gets to play cornerback like Julian Edelman did, who by the way was like not a very good corner, and like I think he gave up like a critical score in a playoff drive or something like that. It doesn't matter. I mean, they were out of corners, so it's like you can't blame him too much. But then I think the comps come roaring back. That'd be really funny if they're like, just like Julian Edelman, just playing cornerback, taking one for the team, having no idea how the position works.
Adam Thielen becomes our gadget player, all of the New Orleans Saints. Like we're just gonna.
You're right. Well, I like the idea that like to play defensive back for Zimmer is like a 3-year process to get on the field, except this year apparently, and the technical coaching that it takes is just time consuming and demanding and overwhelming, and it could just be so hard for people to pick up on the system. And we've seen rookie after rookie get burned in the Zimmer system, despite being good players overall in the final analysis by the end of their career. And Adam Thielen just being like, I mean, we ran out of guys, so I'll play, and him just like lighting it up. That would be so funny to me.
Yeah, it's like this isn't exactly being a part of the hands team, there, kid. On an offside kick or
right, yeah,
onside
it's
kick.
like, I think he could play corner better than Gronk played safety. I'll say that.
Do you think he could play corner better than J.J. Watt was playing tight end? Because all he did was score.
He'd play corner better than Jared Allen playing tight end. How about that?
Okay, I'm. Yeah, speaking of, why have we not seen more of J.J. Watt at tight end? I feel like what do you have to lose at this point if you're the Texans?
That's a good point. I remember, well, I think part of it is just JJ Watt gets hurt all the time. And so if he gets hurt on a tight end play, everyone's just going to be like, man, what the hell?
Nonsense. I think he got hurt scoring. Like that's all he was doing. Every time he touched the ball, it was gold. I remember.
Yeah, I remember the one time they put him on offense where he got the ball and didn't score. It was at running back. And I got so mad. I was like, no, you got to let him do it again.
Yeah.
Like, it is so funny that the entire team is JJ Watt. Do it again.
It was perfect. And I remember when it happened like 2 times that year, and finally ESPN, I don't know if Yahoo ever did, but ESPN finally put him in as somebody you could like as you could pick up on the waiver wire to put him at tight end or flex. It was just
that's so great. ESPN has been like much better about this than Yahoo, and Yahoo has changed service providers a couple of times for their data, but I mean, like they still have ESPN has Taysom Hill listed as a potential tight end, and he's tight end eligible, and obviously therefore flex eligible, and Yahoo still doesn't do it. That's a cowardly move, man. Let him do
Indeed.
it. Let him do it. ESPN has JJ Watt as a tight end. You can't make Taysom Hill, who plays more tight end snaps than any other position, play tight end. Come on.
And speaking of Yahoo at fantasy, I did look into whether or not I could add kicker to the flex position and force everyone to start 2 kickers. But apparently that is frowned upon in this establishment. Thank you, Yahoo.
Well, so next year we can make it a super flex league, but disqualify you if you put a quarterback in that position.
Yeah, maybe. Or just you can make people just start 2 kickers. Like that, that is a thing that you can just do. Like
all right, next year 2 kickers.
Oh God, that. Oh
yeah,
no.
Justin Tucker definitely going first round in one of these drafts if that happens.
That what's good is that I say things like this in November, and then in August I totally forget when I'm setting things up for the league as to what I would like said aloud would be a good idea. I don't write these ideas down for a reason.
You should set a boomerang in Google right now. Like go into Gmail and send yourself an email that in August reminds you to set up the 2 kicker league.
Oh God, I don't know if I'm ready to hurt that bad. Well, I mean, I'm in 4 of these leagues, so I mean, I'm 5 if you want to be technical. Yeah, this is pretty awful. All right, well, let's get into the mailbag, and there's a couple of good questions in here to start off, including: did Ezra Cleveland's play help Bradbury in any way?
Maybe. So, there was, I don't know if it was Bradbury who was saying this, but I think it was Bradbury. But there was a center that was talking about playing with a guard who's struggling. Now I'm confident Bradbury was saying this, playing next to a guard that is struggling. And oh no, it wasn't. It was Jeremiah Searles. I'm so wrong. Jeremiah Searles was talking about Garrett Bradbury, and on Matthew Coller's podcast, and he was saying it must be so difficult for Bradbury because as a center, you want to go over and help. You see your guy get spinned around next to you, and you know that you might have the ability to help, and you want to leave and help. And you can't do it because if you leave and help, both of those guys get to the quarterback instead of just one guy. You gotta stay on your assignment as you notice the guy next to you struggling. Yeah, this is Searles who said it, and that's kind of one of the difficulties with center. Is that on plays where you're not assigned to help, you can't do it at all. And from the perspective of like being able to kind of remain calm and focused, maybe it helps. But for the most part, there's a lot to be said about how important offensive line chemistry is, but that's really better for evaluating kind of unit level play or seeing if there's like a bust in run blocking. And so I think you can evaluate individual play without having to account for the talent level of their teammates on like 95% of plays on the offensive line. And I think most of the discussion surrounding, having this guy here can help this guy, or most of the discussion surrounding chemistry and stuff like that, I think it overblows how much individual talent plays a role. And we've seen elite offensive linemen get dropped into bad offensive lines and continue to play at a really high level. Or we've seen an offensive lineman ascend to play at a high level, play high level status amidst an offensive line that's struggling. A really good example of that is that Garrett Bowles in Denver this year is having a remarkable year, like a surprising year. He's not committing that many penalties. That was his biggest problem. He wasn't that great of a pass protector. He gave up a ton of pressures. And now he's pass blocking for like 3 different quarterbacks. He hasn't given up almost any pressures this year. And the rest of his offensive line is just awful. And he is playing lights out. You can evaluate individual offensive linemen, and they move from line to line, and sometimes they're on good lines, sometimes they're on bad lines, and they play at a really, really high level. We've seen that with guards. When Logan Mankins left the Patriots to play for the Buccaneers for one of those years, he played at a really high level. I don't think I think it's very easy to overstate that. The only difference is when there's kind of like a bust in run assignments or in stunt blocking or communication or something like that. That's when it comes into play, and that just doesn't happen as often as we like to think. It actually did happen on one of Dalvin Cook's runs, the 20-yarder. It's in my piece that breaks down Dalvin Cook's runs where Ezra Cleveland goes up to the second level because he thinks he's got help from Brian O'Neill on his guy, where he thinks Brian O'Neill is going to down block on him. But it turns out, because of the zone blocking rules and the unusual front that the Packers ran, that actually Brian O'Neill was covered and he had his own assignment that he had to take care of, and he couldn't down block. And so Kingsley Kiki has a free shot, just like an unblocked free shot at Dalvin Cook, and Cook just avoids it. And so that is a situation where the play of your teammates may look better or worse. Like, it may be the case that this could have been charged to CJ Ham. It wasn't, because Ham ended up getting to his assigned blocker, but it could have looked like it was on CJ Ham, and it wouldn't have been on him. It would have been on Ezra Cleveland. And that is like an instance where your teammates' poor play has an impact on how people perceive you. But this just doesn't happen as often, I think, as we like to say. I think you can evaluate individually high-level offensive linemen in a bad environment and still conclude that they're playing at a really high level. Joel Bitonio did that for a while with Cleveland before Cleveland put together their current elite offensive line with like J.C. Tretter on one side and another great guard in Wyatt Teller. And I guess Jedrick Wills is struggling right now, so he doesn't even have a good tackle next to him. But for the first couple of weeks, Jedrick Wills is doing well too. So we see this happen with guards and centers where they play well and people around them don't. And improving the level of the play of the people around them doesn't really do a ton in terms of our evaluation of them individually.
Next question is also about Ezra Cleveland. It's from Michael, who says, let's say Cleveland develops into an average or even above average right guard this season. Would it be wise to keep him at a position he is exceeding at, or look for a new left tackle in the draft, or move him to left tackle next season and look for a new right guard elsewhere?
Yeah, as much as this presupposes that Riley Reif is gone, and I think that is a fair assumption based off of the fact that the Vikings don't have much cap space and he consumes a really large cap hit. Hopefully the Vikings can trade him, because I think he's going to be worth something given how excellently his season has gone. So in that evaluation, you have to make a decision about whether or not you want to draft a tackle to play tackle, or draft a guard to play guard, or maybe draft a tackle to play guard, or keep Ezra Cleveland at guard. And I think that despite how much it's been frustrating not to see good guard play outside of Joe Berger for the past 6 years, I think it's still better to play Ezra Cleveland at tackle and hope he plays average than have him play guard and hope he plays above average, right? Like, if he's an above average guard, that's not worth as much as an average tackle. It really isn't. So despite the fact that Cousins seems to do worse against interior pressure, the replacement level of ability of a guard it's not as big as the replacement level ability of a tackle. And so you're just going to get more pressure coming from the edge. And though it seems like Cousins struggles more against interior pressure, most quarterbacks, and I think Cousins is actually included in this, still actually do worse against edge pressure. And I think it's because edge pressure comes when it does arrive, the player's usually moving a lot faster and they're harder to avoid. So I still think you want to have him at tackle, at least try him out at tackle, probably his natural position given his skill set and college position, and then take another shot at a guard, rather than say, oh, he's worked out at guard, great. Well, I guess we'll keep him there and have him play a less valuable position, because I think the transition for him to play guard is a lot tougher than him playing guard for a year and then moving him back to tackle, because he'll still have all the training as a tackle. So I'd rather move him to tackle, hope he plays at an average level there, than hope you've got an above average guard.
Next question is from Ian Pauley, who asks, how long can we bank on Green Bay's defensive coaching blunders proving too much for their offense to overcome? Until Rodgers is done? I mean, who wouldn't put Preston Smith in coverage on 4th and 3?
I think at some point they're probably going to get rid of Mike Patton, and he's a guy that I defended a lot. I thought that he did Obviously, really well with the Jets. I thought he did okay with the Bills. I thought he actually did a better job than expected with the Browns, but he's just not doing it with the Packers. So they'll probably get rid of him. And given how talented those pieces are, Jair Alexander, Darnell Savage. Now you've got Kamal Martin, but Kenny Clark, Preston Smith, Zadarius Smith. That's just so much talent on defense. Raven Green is playing really well. He's a hybrid safety nickel that we discussed in the interview. There's so much talent on defense. I think that's a good defense, just waiting for an average coordinator to let it shine. So I don't think we can depend on it for too much longer. I think Pettine's probably done sooner rather than later.
Next question is from Andy Sherman, who says, no time traveler questions today. Sorry. I assume he has asked one in the future because he has access to said time traveler. What does Wonnum need to do to be worth it as his draft pick? And has he done it already?
So I like what does has he done it already mean? Because like if he retires tomorrow, that it's not worth the draft pick. It's not worth a 4th round pick to draft him. You get one good game and then one good play in another game, right? That's not worth a 4th round pick. You can get a lot more from a 4th round pick on average. If he plays at this level of play going forward, it's not even close. He's way worth it. He's beyond worth it, because he's playing as a high level starter. Like if he gets 5 pressures on 35 pass rushing snaps, so I guess 1 in 7, which is what, like 14% or something like that. If he has a 14% pressure rate for the rest of his career, even if that's only on 3rd down and it's actually closer to like 10 on standard downs or something like that, he's a high level pass rusher and you get him in the 4th round. So he would be beyond worth it. So there's one scenario where has he done it already means, if he retired tomorrow, they'd have already gotten their money's worth, and that's not the case. And there's another scenario where if he continues to play at this level, he's a high level pass rusher, not like elite, but like borderline pretty high level. And so then he'd be more than worth it. So I don't really know what this means, but for him to be worth it going forward, he has to play basically like Ifeadi Odenigbo did last year at some point, and he doesn't have to do it this year, but if at some point he earns a second contract and he is playing like the primary backup defensive end, not like he's probably going to be playing a lot of snaps, so he's going to play more than a primary backup would. But if he plays at the level of a primary backup defensive end, like Ifeadi did last year or something like that, then I think he'll have been worth the 4th round pick, which I think speaks to how valuable the Ifeadi Odenigbo pick was, even though the Vikings cut him and then he went to 2 different other teams before he came back to the Vikings. He has exceeded his pick capital by quite a bit. I think if you get a high level backup at a good position in the 4th round, you have gotten your money's worth out of that pick. So that's worth it. And he seems to be on that trajectory with the caveats that I talked about earlier. So it looks like he's beginning to be worth it. But a guy who has an impact play early on in his career as a 4th round rookie, certainly, he's beginning to look like he's worth the pick. I think that I hope that answers the question.
Luke Braun asks, so how long do you think we get to have hope before we go back to the gallows?
Yeah, a couple of days, I think.
When's the next game? This Sunday?
Right. Yeah, they're 6.5 point favorites against the Lions. I don't trust that. Who does?
If we just keep walking into all these games thinking there's no way they're going to possibly win, they could end up in a decent playoff spot. Green Bay was clearly playing the long game when they lost to the Vikings to ensure they weren't going to get some sort of like a top 3 pick.
Yeah, right. If they win out, right, they're 11-5. That's good for a 2 seed, right? Which is not worth as much as it used to be. But hey, man, it's the Lombardi's headed this way. So they still have Tampa Bay left on the schedule. Like, despite how well Tampa Bay did not play in this game, that's probably a loss, right? So that's another loss in the schedule.
And there's New Orleans on Christmas, which
the Saints are not that good.
What a weird team.
They are a very weird team.
That is, and the defense isn't very good anymore. Like their window looked like it shut real hard at the when the Vikings beat them last playoff game. Like it seems
okay,
like
so they've got a Cowboys game on the schedule that looked a lot tougher at the beginning of the
year. We're getting to that. Yeah, the Saints are just such a weird team. Drew, I can't remember who had tweeted it, but anything after 10 yards when Drew Brees throws it is just an adventure.
Oh yeah. I forgot who tweeted that too, but that's basically accurate.
Yeah,
let's say they got 2 Nick Foles Bears, they got 2 Lions games coming up. I don't want to be too confident against the Bears given the history there, so be wary of that, but those should be wins, right? Based on how the Vikings played last week. I don't know. It's tough to say that anything should be a win based off of the first couple of weeks. So.
Well, you look at how the Vikings played this week and how the Vikings played against Seattle, and you apply all of that to the remaining games. Like, okay, well, we're 11-5, but then you have to factor in, well, the defense is basically
but also the Falcons.
Yeah. You kind of have to average it out. Like, so the defense and especially the corners are basically one of those houses that your kid puts together made of popsicle sticks. Like, it's not, this isn't sustained. This isn't going to work, but it's nice to daydream just for a bit.
I think I wouldn't be surprised if the Lions game falsely sustains that hope. I think it might be the Monday night game against the Bears the week after. I think that's when it just like crumbles again. Because which would be very Vikings, right? Because not a lot of people like believe the team can do anything at this point, right? But I think a win against the Lions, that's enough for people to be like, yeah, but what if? What if? And then a Monday night game against the Bears, like that's got to be flexed out, right? Like you can't do that to people.
No,
you can't do that to your national audience.
No, what you do is you flex in an NFC East game just to give them a nice middle finger,
as is tradition,
as is tradition, as has been the case this year. No, it's gonna the Vikings are gonna play the Lions, and Hawkinson's gonna end up with like 3 or 4. He's gonna get the record for most touchdowns for a tight end in a game. They're just like, oh, well, that was short lived. Darn shame. Turns out Thielen might have been a better corner than what was assigned.
Right.
Ryan asks, seeing as this offensive performance was basically Zimmer's wet dream of an offense, how does he convince the Wilfs to rip off the roof of US Bank Stadium to have weather affect more of the games?
I would love the idea of Zimmer constantly harassing NFL ops to let him keep the giant doors open, which is technically a possibility. The Vikings could theoretically play with the doors open. But yeah, I don't think they'll be able to convince the Wolves to rip the roof off.
Brisk December
which I don't think it's outside the realm of Zimmer's like imagination either. He's like, I wonder if we could just get that thing out of here.
Can we retrofit a roof opening here? Could we? Is that a thing? Just want to see, like, do you remember the first retractable roofs where it was like just like a little square would end up like opening
just
up?
a tiny square, which is that's what the Cowboys Stadium looks like, right? It's just
a little bit bigger. Yeah, I'm just envisioning, it's December, late December, maybe even an early January game, and he's got just
little trap door opens.
Yep, the little trap door opens, and just little bits of snow are falling down in almost like a Disney-esque way. Like in the middle of this game, and just slowly, in the same way,
the temperature of the stadium drops by like 1/4 of a degree.
Exactly, in the same way that you see, you always see trash blowing across the field for the Philadelphia Eagles. Like you just slowly see snow just slowly coming down onto the field, not actually hitting the field because it ends up melting because of the lights. But that's just the hidden charm of the Viking Stadium now that Zimmer forced them to use some space laser that Dusty was trying to use to cut off Florida, to end up opening up a small hole at US Bank Stadium. That is fantastic. Nolan Kaler asks, at what point does the Dalvin versus AP greatest of all time for the Vikings debate begin? And when did the AP versus Robert Smith debate begin? Correct me if I'm wrong, but the AP versus Robert Smith happened his rookie year because he set the rushing record.
Yeah, I would have like I think he began like right away for Adrian Peterson. Um
That was like
I
his third or fourth
don't
game.
Yeah, right. I don't think that there's gonna be a Dalvin versus Adrian Peterson debate. I'm sorry, dude. Now, mind you, our next question goes into more detail as to why maybe that wouldn't be the case, but I'm not seeing it.
You know, contrasting the running styles themselves. I mean, this is Adrian was this. I hate this term because you heard announcers say it all the time, but such a violent runner who's he's looking for contact, he's looking to break through, that sort of thing. Where Dalvin seems to be much more of a finesse runner, right?
Yeah, I would say so. And Dalvin will occasionally like lower his shoulder to seek contact. He's not afraid of it, but like that's a totally different descriptor than Adrian Peterson, who sought out contact, ran through it. Like you're not going to get
Lowered his head as a battering ram.
right, like
Things that aren't
Adrian
legal
Peterson running
anymore.
over. Yeah, Adrian Peterson running over, was it Willie Gay? In the seal, which actually I think occurred
Yes.
on a reception of all things, or him. I wish I remember the name of that Browns player. I think this was in 2009 when
Yes, when he
he's
was
running towards the end zone and a Browns player comes up to make the tackle, and you'd think he's going to make a stiff arm. You think he's stopping to stiff arm, but instead he just kind of picks up the guy and throws him across his like
he
his
was
face.
yeeted. He was yeeted
Yeah.
to the end to the outside. It's
just
the
like,
Adrian Peterson run. When you think of Adrian Peterson, this should be the run that you think of.
Yeah, it's just an absolutely physically dominant person who's willing to use his like he should be more aware of his unnatural strength to uh impose his will on guys that are like 300 pounds, right? Like that's just, and Adrian Peterson was like 212 pounds at the combine. Like it's like he's not a 260-pound guy. Like the way he plays, you think he'd be built like Derrick Henry. They're very similar in terms of the way they use their physicality. Now, Adrian Peterson has a lot more agility than Henry. Obviously, they're not very comparable players overall, but in terms of the way that they deal with contact, the exact same guy, right? And so, yeah, they're not. Dalvin Cook is a super exciting runner. He's really great to see in the open field. He's got home run potential and stuff like that. But Peterson is like that plus more, but without like hands. Like, like right? Like it's just like, oh, I dropped the pass. Oh, I'm fumbling. Like that's all right, but they're obviously not very comparable in terms of styles or runners. And it's not that Dalvin Cook is a slasher. He's just a modern running back. They don't tend to seek out contact very often unless it's a Derrick Henry. But no, I don't think you'll get to that point. I mean, I guess if Dalvin Cook continues to average like 140 yards a game or whatever from a scrimmage, like if he keeps this pace up, yeah, we'll have that discussion probably sometime next year. I don't think he'll keep this pace up.
I'm reminded of the Bomani and Jones video. Who are these cops who thought that jumping on Adrian Peterson's back was gonna take him down?
Right. And how can you be arrested for resisting arrest? These are the questions.
Exactly. Vikings Wales asks a similar question. So Dalvin has 782 yards and 11 TDs through 5.5 games. That's 142.2 yards and 2 TDs per game. If that continued or became 100 yards and 1 TD per game, would he matter?
So the problem here is not what his production is. It is what is the driving force behind his production. So a running back can average 140 yards a game and not matter all that much, which sounds weird. But then I urge you to remember a dude named DeMarco Murray. Like, he did not matter. He ended up with 2,200 yards from scrimmage that year, which what is that per game? Because he did all 16 games, so that's 141 yards a game, right? So he had 141 yards from scrimmage that year, 115 yards for a game just rushing the ball, led the league in rushing touchdowns, right? And he did not matter. He was replaceable. He was, in fact, replaced. When he went somewhere else, he did not matter. He went to Philadelphia, didn't matter there. He went to Tennessee, didn't matter too much there, although one of those 2 years he did average 80 yards a game. And that was like fine. He ended up with 1,300 yards that year. But then Tennessee got out and found a replacement that played even better than him, right? So he didn't matter, right? Well, so if that's the case, then we shouldn't determine our evaluation of how much running backs matter based off of their production, right? Because Le'Veon Bell holds out from the Steelers. The Steelers have a great running game, and the only reason that season didn't go well for them, mind you, they still had a winning record, is because they had a quarterback carousel. So does Dalvin Cook matter if he continues averaging 140 yards a game? That kind of depends on how unlikely, but if he does it in the way that he did in this Packers game, then yeah, he matters because he's producing on his own. He is the driving force behind his production. The reason running backs don't matter in terms of like the analytics parlance is not because they don't produce a ton of yards or anything like that, or because they don't, aren't a driving factor in terms of their production. It's because their production is, generally speaking, replaceable. I mean, you take a look at what San Francisco's been able to do anytime one of the running backs gets hurt, you pick the next one up in fantasy because you know they're going to produce. Like this year, it's Raheem Mostert. Last year's Matt Breida. A lot of people were excited about, JaMychal Hasty. It's just they produce, right? D'Ernest Johnson, in AAF Superstar, is like the fourth running back for Cleveland, and Nick Chubb goes down. They've got the best offensive line in football, in my opinion, and D'Ernest Johnson produces a remarkable game. Kareem Hunt continues to produce. The argument is not that, if you run the ball a lot and get a ton of yards with the guy, or even if you break off a bunch of big runs, that production doesn't matter, because the running game does matter. Like it's correlation to winning. Once you account for, the run to win scenarios, once you account for the fact that you run more often in winning situations, the correlation is about half that of passing. Passing is significantly more important than running in terms of projecting future wins, but running does matter a lot. The issue is that running backs are not in control of their production. So the question is, if he continues leading the league in metrics like rush yards over expected, which right now he leads the league in rush yards over expected, which is a next-gen stat that takes a look at everything that occurs at the moment of handoff, like the angles and vectors and speed of the blockers, the speed at handoff, the formation and the distance and the number of players in the box and all that. All of the factors that contribute to an individual running play and its likelihood of success. Anything above or below that is rushing yards above or below expected. Dalvin Cook leads the league in that statistic, which implies that he is in control of his own production to some degree to that level. Now, some of that is still doesn't do a great job of parsing out the running back, and in rush yards over expected per attempt, he's not among the league leaders, but he leads the league in in avoided tackles this year. He's one of the league leaders in yards after contact, right behind Derrick Henry, and he's ahead of Derrick Henry in yards after contact per attempt. And I believe he's number 4 in per attempt after you filter out, running backs with fewer than 30 attempts, and he's number 1 with running backs with at least 100 attempts, right? So all of the metrics that individualize a running back's production seem to indicate that Dalvin Cook is responsible for his production, and so therefore thus far has mattered. But if the Vikings running game significantly improves, there's a good chance a lot of that's because of blocking, and therefore it wouldn't be because Dalvin Cook mattered. So does Dalvin Cook matter if he continues producing these statistics? It depends on how.
Plus, we've already paid him, so he's ruined.
Yeah, he's done for. I mean, take a look at Zeke and CMC.
Exactly. And at the time, DeMarco Murray was somebody that you could that people did argue that you needed to pay. Hey, Jerry Jones, you need to pay him. You need to pay him, and he didn't, and he fell off.
And much to everyone's surprise, Jerry Jones was right. Only then to be wrong when he drafted Zeke.
Well, I mean, stopped clock right, twice a day.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Chris asks, is Andre Patterson just specifically good at training edge defenders and not 3 techs, or do they keep just not drafting actual three techs?
No, I think it's a question of the talent available to him. I would say that it's really unlikely that someone can be great, like legitimately great at coaching edge rushers and be poor at coaching three techniques. Like it would not boggle the mind, but it would shock me that somebody would have that kind of profile. I think it is much more likely that the Vikings are just not as good at identifying talent at the three technique position as they are at edge rusher. So I think that's more likely it. Plus, you can also take a look at success stories like Tom Johnson. I think that he's a really good example of a player that benefited a ton because he didn't play all that well with the Saints, right, before he signed with the Vikings. He benefited a ton from Andre Patterson's coaching. And then even Shamar Stephen, I think, is a success story. He's not a very good defensive tackle, but he also was a 7th round pick. He is far exceeding the play expectation of a 7th round pick. And then also Sharif Floyd played really well under Andre Patterson. Like he played okay in 2013 as a rookie. He actually struggled a bit, but he played really well under Andre Patterson before the injury. So I would say that the evidence suggests that when he does have talent available to him, and it's really hard to parse this out. It's really hard for us to figure, hey, this guy's talented, but he wasn't coached well versus this guy isn't all that talented and he was coached well and they're both playing at the same level of play. It's very hard to make that determination. But I think the evidence somewhat suggests that actually he's pretty good at coaching three techniques, and the Vikings just haven't given him one and Sheldon Richardson played really well under him too, right? So, well, I mean, he was off and on. He had some really great games, some really poor games, but he played well and he played better than he did in Seattle. So, yeah, I think that when he does have talent available to him, he coaches a player to get the most out of their talent level when we've had evidence of that.
Next question is also from Chris, who asks, how optimistic do we feel about Cam Dantzler's health after Zimmer's confident statements that he could play next week?
Well, Zimmer did put a timeline on this one, right? Like he didn't really put a timeline on the Hunter one, although he was like, yeah, we expect to see him he may have said by the start of the season at some point, but he walked that back. I think when you get to see the injury happen, it's a little bit different. Like nobody saw the Daniel Hunter injury, so it was kind of easier for Zimmer to hem and haw. Plus, the more I'm hearing about this kind of injury, the more the initial statement from Zimmer might have actually been genuine, and then he just kind of stuck to it. So yeah, I would say that it is pretty likely he's telling the truth here. And I get burned more than so. Like, take this with a grain of salt. I get burned all the time when I'm like, I think Zimmer's telling the truth on this injury situation. I say it all the time, and I'm always wrong. So take it with a grain of salt. But I think having hopefully learned lessons from all of that, I would say that this time there is a not 100% chance, but like an above 50, maybe a 60% chance that Cameron Dantzler's ready to go. Which, if he isn't ready to go, that's not an indication I got burned again. It would only be an indication I got burned again if he's so not ready to go that he's also not ready to go the week after.
Question from Joe Justice. Is Trey Lance good? Can you give a non-biased take on Trey Lance?
Never heard of him in my life.
Fair enough. I was just ready to move on, but if you actually wanted to talk, you could.
No, I just haven't watched enough of any of the college quarterbacks to have like a true take. Like, someone asked me about Carson Wentz back when he was in the draft, which the Vikings weren't in the market for because they had Teddy before he got injured. But someone asked me about my unbiased take, and I was able to give a take because I had watched him enough to have a scouting report. And for the most part, he's played to that scouting report, except in 2017. So like, stuff like holding onto the ball and stuff like that. So I can do it, but if I can just live in the bit for a bit longer, I will.
just let me get to 2021, okay? Just let me let me make
I'll watch Trey Lance when I have to.
Duke's Code asks, or doesn't really ask, but well, no, I suppose he does.
Is this a comment or a question? Yeah. More of a comment.
I've got a comment, I've got a question, and then I've got a comment. Mike McCarthy is the worst coach in the NFL. Has any quarterback been more disadvantaged by poor play calling and supporting cast than the Ben DiNucci?
Yeah, I mean, I feel for DiNucci, man. I mean, you take a great talent like that just needs a little bit more seasoning in the NFL, get used to the speed of the game, and you give him just this awful receiving core. What, like Amari Cooper, Michael Gallup, CeeDee Lamb? I just don't see how anyone could produce in that environment.
Yeah, that's troubling. Really, it's
Yeah,
much worse than when you
and then
had
I mean,
those
who's
terrible
he handing
quarterbacks
off
in
the ball to?
Arizona.
Who is am I getting this right? Ezekiel Elliott? Never heard of him.
All I know is you take a look at that nose ring, and you know he can't run. You know he
Yeah,
can't play
it's
running back.
terrible. And I mean, the coaching staff, I mean, they're not setting him up for success. I mean, they gave the ball more to Zeke than they did to this Tony Pollard guy who was averaging more yards a carry. I don't know what was up with that. And then, oh God, this offensive line. Well, actually, the offensive line was not great, but yeah, it's very clear. I mean, everyone's talking about Amari Cooper. It was obvious he wasn't open. If he was so open all the time, like all these nerds keep saying, then why didn't he get a target until the second half? Answer that. So, yeah, man, really got to feel for DiNucci for not having the supporting cast he needs to really succeed. Plus, I mean, the defense kept letting him down. He had to keep playing catch up. I mean, that Eagles offense just so hard to keep up with. So,
with the powerhouse of Carson Wentz, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I'd say like Travis Fulgham. Is he Old Dominion? I think Travis Fulgham's Old Dominion. From I think was that Taylor Heineke school? Did Heineke never threw to Fulgham? Did he? No, he probably didn't. But yeah, just it's hard to keep up with the powerhouse of Miles Sanders, Boston Scott, Travis Fulgham. Jalen Reagor was healthy for the first time. You know, he scored a touchdown. And Ben DiNucci is dealing with the dregs here. Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb. Come on, get him some receivers with the talent of Greg Ward, then we'll talk.
Man, it is really hard to throw the ball more than 20 yards when you're sidearming it like that every throw.
And yet he does it. It's just remarkable, the talent that he has. You're right. That's the point you were making.
Yes, that's exactly where I was going with that. Thank you. We've been podcasting so long that we really do finish each other's sentences. Yeah, it's that is terrible.
Uncanny, yeah.
Uncanny. God, what trash. That was a rough game.
I feel so bad for him, dude. He was just not ready.
No, absolutely not.
He's not that good, and he's probably never gonna be. But dude, it's just such a bad environment to be in.
Like, well, you thought you were signing on to be the third stringer. Well, Andy Dalton just got, the stigmata, so you're gonna have to come out and play for a couple of weeks while Andy's bell is unwrong.
He got Luke Falked, man. That was just brutal.
Oh. How you don't get suspended for that, I don't know. But yeah, just absolutely rough situation. And DiNucci just was not in a position to be able to succeed. That he was clearly not gonna Dak the situation up when Dak came up after Tony Romo went down. No,
actually, I think this is it. I think now that you bring up Dak, this might be I think DiNucci is just such good friends with Dak Prescott. He's doing him such a solid right now because the worse he plays, the better Dak Prescott looks, and the more he's worth on an open market. So that's just homie behavior. You got to stand up for DiNucci for doing a solid for Dak like that.
Yeah,
that's incredible.
You and I both know that Jerry Jones is going to franchise Dak the moment that he can. Like, this is not, he's going to get double franchised, which I think has only happened with Kirk Cousins, and try to get him somewhere else. Like,
of all people. Well, I mean, actually, Kirk Cousins is like the perfect double franchise candidate, right? Because she's like, well, he's too good to let go of, but he's not good enough that I want to commit. Let's just pay him $140 million or whatever.
Yeah, let's just let's just ignore all logic here and just bring him in for a bit. Duke's Code also asks, are the Saints breaking any rules with their cap overages in 2021? I'm assuming not, but it feels like they are.
I mean, they probably aren't, but I mean, they might by the time 2021 rolls around. Okay, so Drew Brees is probably going to retire, which is going to make that cap situation look a lot easier to figure out. So I wouldn't be that worried if I were the Saints unless I was really committed to a free agency signing.
Is it possible that they've just been expecting him to retire the last 2 or 3 years? and that's why they've like have the cap
I
situation that they
think
do.
so. I think they kind of expected him to retire this year.
God, his throws truly are a wondrous adventure. Brian Jellerson asks a question that I assume is just for me. Says, inspired by the new graphic, how would you rank the following Arif rants? Turkey is trash meat. I'm not a Seahawks fan. No such thing as too many Excel spreadsheets. Wentz is bad, and the Bears are fake.
Hold on, did I actually rant about the spreadsheet thing, or is that just a bit?
No,
Or did I rant?
I think that's just a bit because every once in a while I ask you how many Excel spreadsheet tabs you have open, which while I'm answering this, if you want to count that.
Oh, Jesus Christ, hold on. I'm writing 2 articles. This is not fair.
So if I was going to rank this, see, the Bears are fake isn't even really it is a take, but it's not really the one that you want to put in. The one you want to put in is that Trubisky can't throw left. That's the real, like, the thing that should go on the ranking.
That one's like gold standard stuff.
Yeah, unless you're
Plus, it's going to be immortalized because I don't see how Trubisky like gets a job after this.
Yeah, he kind of DiNucci'd himself here. Let's take a look at the rankings. I'm gonna have to put Turkey is trash meat at number 1. No, actually, you know what? I think the Seahawks and the Seahawks thing is actually managed because it has national exposure now. It is now above the Turkey thing.
Oh god, you might be right. Is that it's got more notoriety?
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm gonna have to go Seahawks 1, Turkey 2, Wentz right at 3, Bears are fake 4, and then spreadsheets being 5, and we can just assume that the Trubisky left thing is just like it's had its number retired, so it doesn't matter in this like ranking.
Right, yeah, we've like it's Alan Page, it's 88, no one can use it.
Exactly. It's just not something that's even being considered.
Oh, I sent you the wrong screenshot. That is, for some reason, a screenshot of Mint emailing me 80 times in one day.
Why?
I have no idea why I took a screenshot of that. You're right.
I was actually going to ask, why is Mint emailing you 80 times during a day?
Well, let's find out. Exceeded budget for coffee shops, exceeded budget for gas and fuel, exceeded budget for restaurants, exceeded budget for groceries. Apparently, I exceeded my budget.
Apparently, that's a number of sheets here.
Yeah. So just so that I'm not like inflating the number of sheets just for the bit, it is 25 Excel spreadsheets, most of them untitled, which is like a nightmare. I've got like book 4, book 5, book 8, book 19, book 20. And then I've got like some CSVs I downloaded from PFF. So receiving _summary 1.csv, yards per route run 14.csv. Just like I've got like 3 spreadsheets in there that I've myself named. So it's a bad time.
That computer restarts, you are screwed.
Oh yeah, I'm jumping off a cliff.
Like, well, that's it for me. Swervin Shervin asks, do aliens belong in the Halloween pantheon of spooky entities, or are they cast aside for more traditional ghoulies like witches, mummies, ghosts, and devils? I think the thing about aliens is that they don't need a holiday. Like they can be at any of an Independence Day, but like they don't really need. As I shoot myself down mid argument. Oh God. Part of me wants to redo that, but I'm just gonna roll with it.
No, this is great.
Aliens don't need a specific time or place. Like if aliens came during Halloween, you go, of course. If aliens came down the day before the election, you'd go, of course. Like it doesn't matter. Like they can come at any point in time, which is part of the horror aspect of them. That they can just come down whenever they want.
I guess, but like if you. Okay, I'm not going to actually push back because the more I think about it, the more I think you're right. Because I think the litmus test is if you're like painting or drawing or creating some sort of decoration for Halloween and you draw a bunch of monsters on there. You would draw, I guess we'll call it a Frankenstein because it's pedantic to call it a Frankenstein's monster. But you draw a Frankenstein, you draw a vampire, you draw a ghost, you draw a zombie maybe, which probably looks a lot like your Frankenstein. You'll draw, but if you draw an alien, I don't think anyone would super object or anything like that, but they'd be like, huh? Yeah, okay. So I think it's just out of place enough that we wouldn't include it in the pantheon of Halloween monsters. Um, and like, which is weird, right? Because you could draw basically anything on that deck. Like, you could draw the red furry monster from Bugs Bunny that is like doesn't have a shape, and everyone would be like, "Yeah, okay, that works." But you draw an alien, and it's like obviously an alien. You just be like, "I don't know about that." You could draw a giant insect, and people would be like, "Yeah, okay." But you draw an alien, especially like one of the popular culture gray aliens, you'd just be like, "I don't know."
Or
Put the
even
insect back on.
or even the alien from the movie Aliens. Yeah, you'd be like, you could, but it's not really doing anything for you Halloween wise.
Yeah, it doesn't feel right. But you make up a monster that doesn't look like an alien, and someone's like, "Yeah, okay, I'll buy it."
As long as it's not Independence Day, yeah. Uh, Logan asks, "Love the new logo. Where can I find Arif's interview with Noam Chomsky? Also, which Halloween monster would be the best fit for an NFL team, and what position would it play?"
Um, which Halloween monster would be best fit for Halloween? Probably a werewolf, right? That's a Halloween monster. Um, and it would play every position. Who's going to tackle a werewolf?
I'm just envisioning since you mentioned it, the shapeless red monster from Bugs Bunny playing defensive tackle.
Yeah, I could see them play fullback. Like,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think werewolf you definitely want for skill positions. Werewolf I think could play linebacker pretty well. They tackle really well. Maybe they don't like play quarterback all that often, but I think you could run wildcat with a werewolf. Probably want to call it something else, but yeah. Yeah, I think it's a werewolf. I'm sure we'll get like a ton of answers or none. I don't know. Sometimes I ask people to respond and no one gives me anything. And sometimes I have a random opinion and we get like 4 emails about it. But I'm sure like there's a bunch of better answers, but I can't move off of werewolf. I think it's better because I think like zombies and mummies are just like way too slow. Vampire just doesn't seem to fit, right? So I think werewolf, you can get a lot of mileage out of that.
And obviously aliens
Oh,
are disqualified.
yeah, and aliens are disqualified. Oh, and the Noam Chomsky thing. So that is the podcast is called Habibti Please, which is like a Muslim pun. Um, and you can follow it at Habibti Please. It's not published yet, and that is like not wonderful given that we're recording the night before the election. Most of it is not election specific stuff, so it's not going to like age really badly or anything like that. But it'd be nice if it was published. There's just been a bunch of hiccups with the editing process, which normally would be a joke about how like wide left never publishes. We've got like 2 episodes in the chamber that are now irrelevant, and because I just took too long to edit them. I have not been in charge of the editing process at all. So for the first time, this is not my fault. But it'll be up soon. It's out of my hands. It's actually out of my co-host's hands too. But yeah, it got delayed, like just cause. So yeah. Look forward to your who should you vote for takes on November 5th.
Adam asks, "Is Maddie Matheson the Chris Farley of cooking shows?"
That's interesting. So if we like divorce the fact that they're both like big, do we get the same vibe? And I would say only for some of Farley's characters, like the van down by the river guy, yeah, but not like Chris Farley, right? Because he played like some understated characters. He played some really loud characters. He played some characters that would be understated, then get really loud. And Maddie Matheson is like always loud. So I don't know, but it's not a bad initial instinct. And I think you've got a better answer than me.
You know, I've watched far more Maddie Matheson than I care to admit, including some episodes of the TV shows that he did for Vice. where he basically attempted like a travel show in Canada.
Yeah, he did. That was great.
And there were parts that were really
What a
funny
disaster.
and interesting, and there was a lot of and he was a bit more subdued at that point. But when it comes to the actual like cooking aspect of it, he knows where his bread and butter is, and he knows that he can just turn himself up to 11, volume wise and otherwise, and be successful at it. So, it's you can see certain aspects of it. It's hard to ignore the physical similarities on that. Incredibly hard to ignore that. So it's possible. I am still upset that the Maddie Matheson's tattooed hands as oven gloves are sold out in his store. I think that would be a fantastic Christmas gift for somebody.
I didn't even realize that's amazing.
So,
That's so good.
but yeah, you could make the argument for sure. Finally, Don from Ohio asks, Super Bowl champion Carson Wentz dominated the matchup last night with Arif's boy DiNucci, including giving the Cowboy the ball 4 extra times so the kid could look good bringing the team back. He couldn't. Where does Arif's brand go from here?
It goes up, dude. I mean, think about this. You can't get up unless you get knocked down. You can't write a good story unless the hero faces the moment of struggle where he has to figure out, is this all worth it? I've been beaten. I've been destroyed. This is the perfect storybook ending. I mean, just take a look at any hero's journey, right? It begins with, you're safe at home. This is Ben DiNucci at JMU. He's safe. And then a reluctant call to action. I don't want to save this franchise, man. I want Dak to do it, but I have to. Also in the hero's journey, the parents die for some reason. Thankfully, that hasn't seemed to happen to Ben DiNucci. So, hopefully we don't follow every part of the hero's journey.
He's not part Batman yet.
Yeah, but reluctant call to action. Eventually, he takes up the mantle. He tries it out. He knows he has to do it. And then the hero faces the pit of despair. That's where we're at in the story, man. But is this going to end in a Super Bowl ring? Probably several. Just incredible stuff from Ben DiNucci. His grit, his stick-to-itiveness, his never giving up.
His sidearm.
His sidearm. He was trying to win the game when there were 9 seconds left and they were down 2 touchdowns. Come on, man. You can't knock that. That's incredible.
Tenacity.
He doesn't slide because, tenacity. He doesn't slide because the NFL rulebook defines sliding as giving yourself up. And he never gives up.
Really? I like how you approach the mic just a little bit closer too for the movie voiceover part. Really?
I think it's the first time in the history of the podcast I've done that.
I'm deleting the next question. We're ending on that because I can't come up with anything better after that. My mind was just blown. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. We hope you enjoyed it. Arif, where can they find your work?
theathletic.com/author/Arif-Hassan. Click on any of my pieces there. And if you're not subscribed, you can get subscribed. And that will give me credit, which helps pay my bills. And I don't know, gives me a raise at some point, hopefully. So do that to read my work and support my work. Otherwise, I guess, I don't know, you get a bunch of my takes for free on twitter.com /Arif-Hassan NFL. But, if you want the good stuff, the primo stuff, head over to The Athletic.
Or keep listening to this, or just keep listening to these episodes, and we'll just see if Arif can break out the movie voiceover voice again. It'll be, who knows what's possible. Anything is possible through Ben DiNucci.
Through Ben DiNucci, whom's through all things are possible.
Whenever I watch Ben DiNucci, I always see just one set of footprints just walking in the sand.
Zeke turns around. Where were you all these times? Son, that is what I was carrying you.
And on that note, we're going to end. So thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Norse Code. Again, if you would like to support the show, you can do so in a number of different ways. But the newest way is at Threadless. You can go to norsecode.threadless.com and take a look at the collection there. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much. And please remember that all things are possible through Ben DiNucci. And we will see you later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at BigMono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.